we are going to be looking at how to use the TI graphing calculators, and I specifically have the TI-84 plus CE. So let's look at how to just enter basic options. First thing I always remind my students is that parentheses matter. So if I just type in 3 and then the way to square is over here where it says x squared, my calculator is going to square it. Now, these two, as we know mathematically, are different, and similarly my calculator is going to interpret them differently. Now, my negative button is way down here at the bottom. This is a common problem. What is the difference between these two buttons? This one is just for subtraction. This one is for negative numbers. So if I type in -3 and then squared, my calculator, as it's supposed to, is going to leave it as negative, because here we're not squaring the negative. So if I want to square the negative, I need parentheses. My parentheses buttons are here, so I'm going to enter it as -3 in parentheses, quantity squared. As a general rule, however we have it written down in paper is probably exactly the same as we should have it on our calculator. Now I have my square button. What if I want to type in another exponent? What if I want to do 2 cubed? So I'm going to hit 2 and I'm going to press the math button. There's a lot of stuff underneath this math button. And if we go down here to the third option, you can hopefully see that little 3. That is my cube button. I can also, however, do it from over here using the caret button. So again, I can use either math and pick that third option, or I can hit the caret button. So if I hit 2 and then caret, it is going to go into that exponent position. This is how I usually prefer to do things. So let's say I want to do 2 to the 4th. I'm going to hit 2 caret 4 and hit enter. Now let's say I want to do 2 to the 4th and then take away 1. Now this -1 is not in the exponent, it's outside that exponent. So if I'm using this caret key, I am going to then have to hit right. You'll notice my cursor is still in the exponent, so if I hit right, I am now outside my exponent, and you'll notice I hit this button for subtract, because I'm not multiplying by -1, I am subtracting, and my calculator is giving me the answer I want. What if I want to do a square root? What if I want to do the square root of 9? Now, if you look above every key pretty much, there is something in blue. The way to get the blue stuff is by hitting my blue second key. So if you see above the square key, it does have that little square root symbol. So I'm going to hit second, that square button, and there is my square root sign, and I'm going to put then 9. Now, just like we saw with that exponent key, if I want to put stuff outside of that, I'm going to have to get out of that square root key. So let's hit square root 9 again. You'll notice my cursor is still underneath that radical. So I hit right. I am now outside of the radical, and I can subtract 1. Now, let's say I didn't do that. Let's say I didn't type out of it. You can hopefully see that all of these are still underneath the radical. So as I always recommend people, always double check when you've typed something in. Does it look like what we've put by hand? If it doesn't, chances are I've put it into my calculator wrong. Now, what if I want to type another root? What if I want to do the third root of 8? Now, if you remember, that is the same as the 1/3 power, so I could do that with my caret button. So I could type 8 caret. Now, for basic fractions like that, I usually just type it in as with the division key. We'll see later how to do a more complicated fraction. And I certainly could do it that way. But I do have those roots as well. They're all underneath my math button. So if I go to the math button, that 4th option down is that third root, and I could type in then the third root of 8, and yes, I do get that same answer. What if I want to do something else? What if I want the 4th root of 16? So I'm going to go to the math menu, Now I've got a third root. For any other root, I'm going to pick this one that says x root, and that's going to allow me to put in any other number that I might want. So let's pick that. Now, I didn't put the 4 in initially, but you'll notice my cursor is up in that little index position. So let's hit the 4 there, hit the right button, so now I'm underneath my radical, so I can enter the number I want, and then hit enter. And again, I could also enter that 16, use my caret button, 1 divided by 4. But if I've forgotten that rule, again, I can find all of these radicals underneath that math button. Let's also hit absolute value. Now, as we hopefully remember from mathematics, if I take the absolute value of a positive, it will stay positive, but that negative should turn positive. Now, the absolute value button is kind of hidden. I am going to go to the math menu again, so my good old math menu, but we have some submenus. And I'm going to go to this first submenu, which says num. So I'm going to hit right, and you'll notice I get all different options. That very first option, ABS, is my absolute value. And mine will show up those absolute value signs. Now, if you have an older calculator, it might say ABS parentheses, but mine is a newer one. So if I hit *2, it does give me positive 2. Let's go back to math, num. Again, there's my ABS. This time let's type in -2, hit enter, and as I expected, it did give me positive 2. Now, I did touch on this earlier, the difference between these two buttons, because they do look very similar. Now again, if I write these out, they look, again, very similar, and mathematically, I would interpret both of these as 6 minus 5. I've maybe written my negative sign a little bit small here, but I would still interpret that as 6 minus 5. My calculator is different. If I want to hit a minus, I have to use subtraction. I usually encourage students, try not to think of the word minus, because we do usually use that for subtraction, but we also sometimes use it for negatives. So try to think, am I actually subtracting, or do I want a negative number? So if I am actually doing subtraction, I'm going to hit the subtraction button there, and I will get 1. Now if I type in 6, and then this button, my negative key, 5, again, mathematically, I still think I'm subtracting, but my calculator is interpreting this as 6 times -5. If there's no operation button in there, my calculator does interpret it as multiplication, and it gives me an answer of -30. So that is definitely something we have to be careful about. And again, I always encourage my students, is it a negative number? If so, this is my button. Or am I subtracting, in which case I want to use this button. One other thing to note, obviously if I hit -3, I've got a negative number, but if I hit subtraction and then 3, you'll notice my calculator automatically put an answer there, because we can't start with subtraction. We have to take it away from something. So if you hit that first, you'll notice your calculator isn't just going to do -3. I've in fact done a subtraction problem there.